All right, welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Saturday, April 23rd, 2022. I just want to thank everyone who has been patient in supporting us for as long as you have. I know we've been trying to relaunch the channel. The content, the way we wanted to put it out, has not happened. We have dealt with several things, from COVID to infections to more infections. And we want to thank everyone for all the prayers that were answered. Mari recently being sick and also with infection as well. And just grateful that the community that we have, everybody with your kind thoughts and your prayers and just being patient with us and continuing to support us. And what's fascinating is every month when we see the Patreon members renew, and we don't see a lot of people, in fact, we don't see people leaving the Patreon, and we haven't even delivered the kind of content that we had hoped to deliver you guys. So that speaks volumes to us that I know from speaking from Mari and I's side of things, we would love to be a little more productive on the content side, but with life throwing curveballs left and right at us, finally, I think I'm pretty positive that Jake and Mari have finally reached a point where we can begin to really start getting back to this content and really start preaching the truth and pushing the screws to everyone about the truth, about climate change and what these solar cycles are meaning. But I have a very exciting news. Mari has some big stuff on the horizon coming as well. We're getting some let's just say we're getting some equipment upgraded that will help us produce the kind of quality content that you guys have always kind of been a part of, as far as knowing what we're capable of doing in the past. But right now, we are back. And again, we can't thank all of you enough for your patience of sticking with us and continuing to just offer the support that you've offered, and it shows the volumes it speaks is we are truly grateful. All right, so today, whatever it is, the afternoon, if you're in the West Coast, it's early afternoon. But anyway, what I want to go over tonight is a quick little space update. You know, it's been a while since I've been on live, and again, a lot's happened, right? A lot has happened, but solar wind speeds right now, 485.3. That's moderate. 6.52 is the density with a sunspot number of 101. Now, the last time we did a show, we were down around 27. Hell, we even saw 13. So we're seeing this pattern of a lull for about 2 to 3 weeks, and then things start kicking up again, and then they will die down again. I want to point out, too, so far in this solar cycle, that it's bizarre that we had a peak of 141 already on a smooth sunspot number. That's not saying that that's where we are with the sunspot number of this cycle, but ever since then, we have seen activity rise, but we've never seen the sunspot number go above 141. And I think that's really important to look at when we're talking about smooth sunspot numbers and these every once in a while big flare up of high activity on the sun. But in the overall, the big picture of things, the cycle's not been that active. Now, you could sit here and scream and throw things at your TV right now and say, Jake, what are you talking about? X-class flares here, solar filaments there, all kinds of stuff going on. I understand all that. However, the X-class flares are still weak, not of anything of serious strength. We're talking near the zero level. They're very strong M-class flares. I'm not downplaying it, but this is where we should be right now in this part of the cycle. This is normal. This kind of activity is what we should be expecting right now. This is nothing compared to what we've seen during a maximum. Right now, I'd say we're about 35-40% towards the maximum at this point. We got another 2 years left. I don't know. If you look at solar cycle 24 and compare it with 25, in fact, we can do that real quick, actually. Let's do that. Let's check it out. So here is the comparison of 24 and 25. The minimum there you see of 2008 and 2009 before we got into solar cycle 25, or 24, I'm sorry. The one thing I want to point out the most is this right here. This spot right here. I don't know if you can see that. For some reason my arrow is acting funny, but once we peaked out around 2012, and I believe this is around the, let's get that back into focus here. Where are we at? Why doesn't it show us the numbers there? I don't like that. Let's check this. It's important to me. I'm kind of surprised they put this graph up here with no, if I'm not mistaken, 25, 50, 150, somewhere in the 150 range, 146 range is where that peak is right there. Okay, I'm just trying to, they don't have the numbers listed on near. I said near. So right about here, we're in the 100 range. This is around the 150 range up here, 100. And we see these spikes along the way. Now, 2012, we see this gigantic jump in activity right around, actually it's more like late 2011. Okay? And then things decide to drop out. Look at that. Whoop. That's the double peak that we were looking for. This is the indicator that we usually see in sunspot observations that usually signal the grand solar minimum is upcoming, the next cycle and beyond. Okay? Are you following me so far? This is just an 11-year cycle right here, guys. So we peaked out, kind of like what we did here, in a sense. Not yet, but we will. Let me see if I can make this smaller here because it's not what I want. Let's back this up. All right, that's better. So as we can see, once again, I'm messing with the image. All right. So 2022, and you go back 10 years. Where were we 10 years ago in the cycle? Well, look at that. We were actually higher than that. Let's go 11 years. That's what you want to go by, right? So it's almost identical. If you look, in fact, this right here where my tip of my blue arrow is, to me, that to me says that we are looking at the exact same kind of situation that we saw in solar cycle 24 in the beginning. Am I not right? I mean, this looks like it might be just a little bit lower even. So when you talk about solar cycles and how fast they uptick and how fast they don't, it doesn't really matter. This was a deep minimum. Guys, look at that. I mean, that's a longer minimum. And one of the things I show that represents that longer minimum is also the cosmic radiation dosage rates are still higher than 5%, and they began that way right around late 2015, 2016. That's over 6 years of 5% cosmic radiation dosage rates. Now, I assume that as we continue to move on through the solar cycle, we will finally see a drop. But we had more of a 3-year period of 5% or higher versus a 2-year period in the previous solar cycle heading into 23 to 24. I just thought it was interesting to point these two things out, folks, because you're seeing a lot of misinformation on the internet about this solar cycle outperforming so far, and it's not. It's actually performing right exactly where we saw it in 24. Valentina Zarkova actually predicted solar cycle 24, and her prediction was actually a 97% of accuracy. So when I hear a PhD astrophysicist tell me that we are in a grand solar minimum and they predicted a 97% accuracy on the previous solar cycle, I'm going to go ahead and trust that particular scientist. All right, so let's get right into it really quick. What is a grand solar minimum? Says our favorite, Keith Strong, Dr. K. Strong. Hello and welcome, he says. So let's go ahead and go through this. And I'm going to show you how desperate this particular individual is at moving the goalpost. Okay? This is how desperate they are.
The subject we're going to deal with today is what is a grand solar minimum?
Oh, that's not going to work.
A lot of people have been talking about it recently, saying that we're either in one or we're about to go into one, and there's going to be all sorts of dire consequences if we do end up in a grand solar minimum. But there's no real definition for a grand solar minimum, and everybody seems to have a different one. So let's try and sort that out. What really should be the definition of a grand solar minimum? Are there things we can actually agree about? A lot of people point to the Morley minimum as an example of a grand solar minimum, and I think most people would agree with that, because we had a 70-year period without very many suns.
I'm taking it the sound is... Mario, you see anybody in the chat complaining about the sound? Because it's very low on my end. Okay, sorry about that. I just wanted to make sure that you heard the sound. He okay.
Or in fact, much of the time, no sunspots at all. The greater question is the Dalton minimum a grand solar minimum, as some claim? And are we in one now, as some claim?
So he asked in the beginning of this video, he says, was the Dalton minimum a grand solar minimum on some plane, and are we in one now? So the answers to those is no and yes. No, the Dalton minimum was not part of the grand cycle like the Maunder minimum. The Maunder minimum was part of a grand cycle that happens approximately 350 to 415 years apart. Now, I know we've talked about several theories on grand solar minimums, and 206 years there's a grand solar minimum. But if you really want to do the math on this, I mean, technically, the Dalton minimum happened at a time where it didn't add up as far as a grand solar minimum goes, if you understand what I'm saying. So it's not really that 200-year timeline from the Maunder to the Dalton. So we can't really base that one as a grand solar minimum. And if you look at the Glassberg minimum in the early 1900s, that didn't qualify as a grand solar minimum either, just a period of higher cosmic radiation exposure and lower solar activity for a brief period of time in the early 1900s. So, are we in a grand solar minimum now? Yes, as I just discussed on what are the key signals that we see before we head into a grand solar minimum, and that is the peak, the double peak that we saw in solar cycle 24. Let's keep listening.
And I think the answer to both of those is no, and the reason why this will become clear as we go along. Wikipedia, of course, has a definition of a grand solar minimum, and it's one that several people have used. A grand solar minimum occurs when several solar cycles exhibit lesser than average activity for decades or centuries. The problem with this is exceedingly vague. How many is several? And what's lesser than average? What is average? There's a scientific definition of average, but is that what they mean?
So he's asking, what is average? What is average, he says. Nobody knows, right? Nobody knows what average is. Okay, so let's go see what average is. This is from NOAA. It says here, talks about sunspots here. Weakest cycle in over 100 years. The solar cycle 24, they're talking about the maximum occurred in 2014, with sunspots peaking at 114 in the solar cycle, well below average, which is 179. So, I'm helping DRKstrong understand what the average of sunspots is per cycle. They told you in solar cycle 24 was 114, which was well below the average that is usually 179. I even go as far as saying between 180 to 210 is average for sunspots in an 11-year solar cycle. So there's the definition. And look, you don't have to take my word for it, Keith. Okay? Go to NOAA. NOAA is the one that is displaying this information right now. I'm just repeating what NOAA says, okay? I know that's important to you, that we follow that narrative. So, once again, Keith is playing dumb because he's like, what is really the average? What is a grand solar minimum? What's several solar cycles? Oh, we'll get into more into that. Let's continue, though, with his grand presentation.
And if you're doing averaging, what data do you use? The data is different from place to place. And then what is a significant departure from average? All these questions must be answered if you're going to have a precise scientific definition of a grand solar minimum. Several is vague. Different dictionaries define it in different ways, either 2 or more or 3 or more, and fewer than many. They don't define what many.
It's funny that he says several is vague, just like when they use the term, the consensus says that climate change is caused by human activity. The 97% consensus, that's vague. Consensus of what? What scientist? I mean, we can play this game all day long, right? I'm just saying, it goes both ways.
Is either. So we lack a scientifically precise definition that we can use to define a grand solar minimum. Well, if we need a more scientifically precise definition, well, let's try and create one. What's the starting point? A grand solar minimum is defined as a significant period of time where the sunspot number is significantly below the average. Of course, we need to define significant in each one of these cases. And then again, you have to define what average means. And both of those are a lot more tricky than you might think. Significance?
No, it's just your word salad. And this is part of the confusion that he's trying to install. Now, this guy is actually a solar physicist, believe it or not. He actually has a PhD in solar physics. So it's mind-boggling to me that he is abusing his title with the PhD and showing this information that is completely false. It's not even, this is him making his own little charts. This is not from studies show. This is his definition of what a grand solar minimum is. Keep listening.
Defined generally in terms of the bell curve and standard deviations. If you have a measurement, but that measurement varies from time to time or from place to place, you have a range of values. If you take an average of those, that would be represented by the 0 here, then the bell curve is the number of points away from that average. And the further away you go from that average, the more unlikely that value is to be real.
Oh.
Standard deviations is measured in sigmas, which is a measure of the noisiness of the data. If you go plus or minus 1 sigma, you have 68% of the data encompassed between those 2 points. 2 sigma, you add another 27%. 3 sigma, you add another 4.5%.
What are you
If you've got a 1 sigma result, you have a 2-to-1 chance of being correct. If you have a 2 sigma result, you have a 19-to-1 chance of being correct. And if you have a 3 sigma result, you have a 332-to-1 chance of being correct. Now, most scientists would like to have 3 sigma, but generally 2 sigma is the standard. So let's assume for the moment that we're going to take a standard 2 sigma variation from the average to mean a significant result. The problem with an average is that it changes every...
Are you guys bored yet? I have to show you this last part of the video because this is the biggest cherry picking. This was worse than Trump making the marker path for the hurricane that went into Alabama. Y'all remember that, right? This goes beyond that. So you got to watch this. Pure comedy.
You get a new piece of data. So should we get a very large cycle, the average will go up. If we get a very low cycle, the average will go down. So you can't really deal with a changing average in the sort of definition that we're looking for. The average for the 24 cycles that we have data for at the moment is 116. Now that's using the NOAA definition of sunspot number. The SIDC's definition of sunspot number puts that average at 180. They just use different criteria. But of course, if we took it over the full 400 years, even assuming that the red data is sufficiently accurate to add in, the average would be 100.
Okay,
and so that's
I'm going to stop it right there. This is how you cherry pick the math, folks. So what he's showing you, and I've already explained that we have grand cycles that happen every 350 years to 415 years. And what he's showing you is a half or a little bit more than half of a grand cycle heading back into a modern maximum cycle and not including a data that's on the upcoming grand cycle. So if you want to be fair, then technically we probably should be looking at about 12 to 1400 years worth of data to get the average, not the last modern maximum and then this period of low solar activity. That's not how the average of sunspots is obtained or how they even determine that. Now, again, we can't obviously pinpoint the precision of these solar cycles previous to solar cycle 1, obviously. But the point I'm trying to make here, folks, is that this guy is only choosing information that will persuade you into believing that the number is actually lower when it's not, because he's including a period of time where the averages will drop if you're just basing it on this time scale from 2022 all the way back to 1600. Go back another 400 years. Okay, let's get a full warming period in and 2 of the minimum field, because look at the size of the modern warming period, and I'll get that for you real quick. This is all of this in the blue is the modern maximum that ended in 2016. The warming did as well, and I'll show you that. What I'm saying is you can't just take this here and lump it in with that. This is a modern maximum. This is usual, and this is usual. So we got to have more data. We got to have 400 more years of data, right? It's only fair to get both ends of perspective, and the averages will come out. Now, yes, the 179 has always been my knowledge of average sunspots per cycle. So it doesn't matter if the solar cycle is strong or not. Average sunspots per cycle has been figured up at 179. The reason why is because we have not seen a grand solar minimum in our lifetime. We have never observed one scientifically in our lifetime or anyone's lifetime. So a perfect example of someone cherry picking the data and manipulating it, but it gets better. Watch this.
The average for these various cycles. So you have to be very careful. And also the standard deviation from this would be much, much larger. It would render these data such that there was no grand solar minima or grand solar maxima. Well, let's take a look at the variability of the solar cycle. Now here I'm using the smooth sunspot number from the SIDC shown here on the right in this table.
Here it is. This is let's skip past that because he's just playing with the numbers right there.
Would be considered insignificant changes based on that standard deviation. So I've blanked that all out, and really the only points that are below that threshold are the Mulder minimum for a period of about something like 70 years and one cycle in 1800. There are some points where the maximum exceed, but they're not for extended periods. In fact, none of these are extended periods except for the Mulder minimum. So I think...
Are you seeing this, folks? Are you seeing what he's doing? Wow. Wow. Let me point out. He has said that this is the true average of sunspot activity, and that really the Maunder was the only time that we didn't have any. This is the only true grand solar minimum, says Dr. Keith Strong. And there was a little bit of a blip here, and then there was really no modern maximum. And basically he wants you to believe that we have maintained this average pattern in the last 400 plus years. Wow. How desperate are you to cut up a graph? Here's the original graph. But he doesn't like the way they have formed these numbers because he doesn't think that we're seeing that many sunspots. Well, what if 179 is really only 60? I mean, come on. Guys, totally cherry picking, manipulating the data, blocking it out himself. I mean, it's poorly done too. You can tell that he's wiped it out himself. But so here we have a so-called solar physicist who is lying to you, but he is abusing his title because he has a PhD in a topic. And look, guys, it's all in the playbook of the science of persuasion. The science of persuasion is what AGW uses to control the masses and to convince the masses. Persuasion of science doesn't really have anything to do with the science of the topic, but the science of methods you use to persuade people to believe in what you're saying. Dr. K. Strong is clearly showing this right now. Guys, I can break that down too. There's a video on YouTube. Just Google it. Science of Persuasion. Watch it. It is the playbook to every snake oil salesman and charlatan out there. I'm telling you. This is how it's done. It's been revealed to me. I want you to see it for yourself. I will find the link for you and put it in the chat. Maybe Mario will find. I don't know. But the Science of Persuasion. It's the video that I showed you. I'm in a training course for management right now. And there's a lot of new techniques that they're teaching me about the business and industry that I'm in. And some of the techniques are interesting. When they showed me the Science of Persuasion video, I immediately thought about, oh my God, this is how you convince people that global warming is real. This is how you convince anybody of anything. Just follow these 6 principles in this video. And if you watch the video and then watch Keith Strong's video, you'll see exactly what I'm saying. The whole, finding common ground, finding similarities, making compliments, the image that you know what you're talking about, whether you're showing off your PhD title or, whatever it may be. Everything that he is doing in this video is a part of the persuasion or the science of persuasion.
Only one point that are below that threshold are the Maunder minimum for a period of about something like 70 years and one cycle in 1800. There are some points where the maximum exceed, but they're not for extended periods. In fact, none of these are extended periods except for the Maunder minimum. So I think we're very safe with this definition, saying the Maunder minimum is something special and therefore could be called a grand solar minimum. So we can pull all this together and try to define a grand solar minimum as a period not less than 3 consecutive solar cycles where the smooth sunspot number, based on the SIDC numbers, at maximum does not exceed 50.
So,
and similarly for the grand
Dr. Strong this is his proposed new definition. Boy, hey, listen. This is what they do. They change the strike zone. They move the goalposts, so to speak. That's what he's doing. His proposed new definition of a grand solar minimum, a period of not less than 3 consecutive solar cycles where the smooth sunspot number, SIDC, at a maximum does not exceed 50. Oh. A grand solar maximum is a period of not less than 3 consecutive solar cycles where the smooth sunspot number at maximum exceeds 300. Keith, here, let me try this again. A grand solar minimum is a series of solar cycles with below average activity. Okay? Now, I'm telling you that the grand cycles are 315 to 400, oh, I'm sorry, 350 to 400 years. What we're saying is the modern maximum since the Dalton minimum ended until now. There is no, in my opinion, when it comes to these kind of things right here, because we're talking about grand cycles, there is no definition on how long modern maximums that I know of yet. That's research that's not even the same subject. So the fact that you're trying to tackle the science of solar cycles, and there are different variations for each maximum and minimums. Again, just a bunch of word salad, throw in his fake accent, and he sounds like he knows what he's talking about. I mean, this is from a guy who lives in a neighborhood where they require you to have a $550 mailbox as your mailbox. Okay? The value of the homes in the neighborhood average between $750,000 and $1.5 million. Beautiful neighborhood. Dr. Strong lives in a neighborhood like this, and the HOA is requiring this particular kind of mailbox. It's the rules. It's what's set in place by people who are higher up than him. People who've been in charge of this position for many, many years. Keith Strong is just a resident of this neighborhood. And when you're a resident, you have to follow guidelines and rules. Just like citizens do in regular, when you're a part of a gated community or whatever, you got to follow the guidelines and the rules. They are set for a reason, to keep people safe and to keep the property value around you as high as it possibly can. So, what does Dr. Keith Strong say to the HOA about the mailbox? Well, he goes out and buys him a $15 Walmart brand mailbox and puts it in the ground using a 2x4. $750,000 home. And he wants to use a $15 mailbox in front of his house. Talk about putting the turd in a punch bowl. He actually sued the HOA. The HOA took down his mailbox and put in the proper one. And he also tore that down and put back his shitty mailbox. That's the kind of person that we're dealing with here. So, if we got a guy who can't accept reality and rules, how are we supposed to base credibility on a man who wants to be credible in a very important topic field here, solar cycles, but yet doesn't want to follow a simple rule? And you would think if you own a $750,000 home that you want to help it's just being neighborly. You want your property value to be high so your neighbors are high too. And if everybody's property values are high, you have a happy, safe, and successful neighborhood. Right? I really can't see too many people that would disagree with this on that one. If anybody's listening. But I'm telling you guys, to me, to be this petty, to be that cheap, to go against the principle of things, this is the kind of guy that we want to take scientific advice from. I think at once he was a brilliant solar physicist and lost his mind. I think he had a mental breakdown. He couldn't handle it anymore because he knew he was lying to the people. Now he's just fulfilling the rest of his contract of being a shill and a confusion artist because he's getting in trouble. He's already taken the money. He's not done yet with the work. The disinfo still has to keep coming out of his mouth. Because if I was lying why all the effort in trying to debunk the grand solar minimum? If I'm lying, people just laugh me out the door. Why all the effort in trying to debunk something that has been proven by many, many, many solar physicists? Not just Valentina Zarkova. Got a couple good things in here. Here's another paper here about Maunder minimums. Dr. Valentina Zarkova also has written another paper that was published online on August 2020, talking about terrestrial temperatures being affected by solar activity. And a lot of these papers, not just by Zarkova, but other scientists, they also refer to using the dynamo theory. And if you read in this brief abstract and introduction, I believe they mention the dynamo theory in here as well. So this is all about magnetics, similar work that we've seen from Dr. Valentina Zarkova. Peer-reviewed here on Nature.com. I'm not so sure how much that means to me anymore after I've heard about a horrible allegation that there is $11,000 publishing fee at Nature.com to make it open access. So basically, you can publish it as long as you got the $11,000 to make it open access. Again, a lot of accusations, no solid proof yet, but makes sense to me on why the real science is getting taken down from this website. Because maybe that author did not pony up and pay the piper. Sunspots. Once again, Keith Strong is wrong. Grand solar minimum just begun. Solar cycle 24, in my opinion, showed us the double peak. You guys can see right here. This is solar cycle 24. This is 23. Maximum was up here. So you tell me, if we see another solar cycle that's a little bit like this, or even if it is a little bit higher, so what? You can go to NOAA's space weather section, and they'll show you sunspot values for the 2030s and 2040s, and guess what? They're near zero. Yeah, near zero. Actually, past 2036, it's zero. So, I always defended the Maunder minimum with, it wasn't all days zero sunspots. We just didn't have the equipment to monitor the small sunspots that we see today. Some of these Mickey Mouse sunspots we've seen on spaceweather.com where there's one spot on the sun, but it's a sunspot of 11. You can barely see it. Those kind of sunspots weren't picked up back in the 1600s by Galileo. I promise you that. So, Keith Strong, he plays the old persuasion trick of the AGW and also doing the persuasion, the science of persuasion, deceiving, lying. There's plenty of proof out here that talks about the Maunder minimum and its impacts on our climate. And the reason why, if this was a lined up in the Dalton minimum type minimum right now, I wouldn't be broadcasting about this stuff. The fact that we are indeed in a grand solar minimum, and it lines up with the 400-year cycle of the grand cycle that we are going to experience coming up. Now, Zarkova, as you all know, has put out a paper that defined a super grand solar minimum, which is a 2,000-year, 2,100-year long cycle. And in those cycles are 5 grand solar minimum cycles that last between, or the difference of the intervals is between 350 and 415 years apart. Apart. Not length, but apart. Maunder minimum was approximately 400 years ago. This grand solar minimum we are approaching is going to be a Maunder minimum type grand solar minimum. Why do I say that? I want to show you a few graphs. First of all, this is the long term. This is from 1979 until March of 2022. As you see, we have had some warming happening over the past several years. But the maximum and the modern warming stopped in 2016, which is right here. One of the things I focus on this channel is that since this point right here, we have begun a cooling transition. Begun. Now, you can't get the AGW off. Look where we started. Look where we are. Oh my God, it's a steep hill. They don't want to see what's happening here over the last 6 years. So tonight, I wanted to pull this out because it's important. We had one of the deepest solar minimums just recently in the past 150 years. Just one of the deepest ones in the last 6 years that we've been experiencing solar minimum conditions since 2016 and even today. Yeah, there's 101 sunspots on there right now, but when those sunspots clear out, we're back around the 30s, 20s with 2 or 3 active regions. So how does that affect the temperature over the last 6 years? So tonight, I'm going to show you how that impact has happened. This is global land and ocean temperature anomalies from 2016 till now. It is not much, but it is a decline. Folks, you can see it in the peaks here, here, and here. Notice we're not showing a trend that is showing us peaks that are continuing to climb but decline, just like this little bar right here. Now, look, this is from NOAA. I'm digging this up from NOAA. This is their official site. Let's move on. This is the global land temperatures, which I couldn't agree more. I don't think we warmed or cooled. And a lot of us will argue that we have cooled, and it's a very, very, very slight declination. And I don't even want to call that, I'm just going to say neutral, because I always believe that once we got to 2016, that began a new plateau of warming. That temperatures weren't going up, they weren't going down, they were just going to kind of flatten out for a minute before the transition to cooling, which is what we see right here. Very, very, very little deviation here from 1.5. I mean, very, very slight, folks. Very, very, very slight. In fact, they are going to call it a negative 0.4 over the last 6 years. So, how many times did we report on stuff like this? The last 6 years, we've dropped on the global land ocean 0.13 degrees Celsius. Very minimal, right? Very minimal. This graph here will tell us that we've, on global ocean temperatures, we've lost 0.16 degrees Celsius in the last 6 years. We are cooling globally on oceans. Here is the lower 48. United States. A deviation. Check this out. Wow. Again, the trend is going down. Down. That's the United States. This is the last 6 years. Again, we have been in a solar minimum. Here is another, that's the global ocean one. Check this out. Global ocean temperatures. There's another way to look at it. Yes, we are not looking at the coldest ocean temperatures, but we are definitely well below where we were in 2016. Here is 2016. Here's where we are now. So temperatures obviously coming in lower since 2016. Again, we are dropping. So the correlation is that we have seen warming from 79 till now, but we are now starting to see the beginning of this cooling transition. And it's not by coincidence. Even the maximum temperatures over the last 6 years have dropped since 2016. Again, all the Paris Treaty climate stuff is based on data from 2015 and beyond. Here we are looking at the future of this treaty, and we have done nothing but cool. And you can't sit here and say that the Green New Deal is working, because it's not even in place yet. It's not even in place yet. It's not law to go green yet. It's not law to drive electric vehicles yet. It's not law to ban gasoline engines everywhere. It's not law to ban oil and coal like the Green New Deal wants to do. CO2 is right now sitting at 420 parts per million. Okay? Currently. Also, we have methane rates that are rising over the last 6 years as well. So where am I going with this, huh? I want to show you guys where I'm going with this. This is where CO2 sits currently. Okay? This is where we are today. All my charts have indicated since 2016, CO2 has gone up continuously. My theory for that, this period of why we continue to see it go up, is because of all the increase in earthquakes and volcanoes and forest fires that we've had that also cause CO2 emissions. Methane is also up. So here's the point. If CO2 is killing the planet, if CO2 rise is causing temperature rise, then why in the last 6 years, even though temperature rise has stopped and is actually dropping now, temperature rise is dropping. These are the maximums temperatures every year. Steadily, they are dropping year to year. Other graphs showing us no more warming in the last 6 years. Why? Why are we being told that CO2 and man-made emissions is causing climate change if the CO2 continues to break records and continue to go up to 420 parts per million that's supposed to be dangerous to us, and yet we've cooled in the last 6 years about a 0.5 degree Celsius. And scientists out there want to tell you that the grand solar minimum is only going to affect global temperatures by 0.3 degrees Celsius? Bull. We're only at the tip of the iceberg, and we're seeing a 0.5 degree temperature change already in 6 years? We're already experiencing food shortages because of all the climate change that farmers are adjusting their seed. They have to plant 92-day corn one year, 102-day corn another year, 97-day corn another year. The climate is erratic. The grow seasons are shorter. The winters are longer. We got friends in Nebraska right now, fire dangers all over the place in the central part of the United States, not getting talked about in mainstream media. Folks, there's a food shortage going on, and your president's already said there is. And now we've got planting being delayed in the central part, the heart of the farming community. Nebraska, Kansas, Minnesota, Iowa. Millennial farmer still has not planted corn, which he's got time. It's only April 23rd. He's got time. Ideally, you want it in by June 5th, no later than. But time is moves pretty fast. So I hope that you guys were able to see that the correlation between solar cycles and climate is significant. And this is based on my opinion from the scientific papers that I've shared with you on this channel, and the ones that I see right here that continue to show the proof. Modern grand solar minimum will lead to terrestrial cooling. This was August 4th, 2020 from Valentina Zarkova. More scientific proof that the sun drives the climate, not CO2. The amount of CO2 needed to drive the climate would need to be somewhere around the range of 50 and 80,000 parts per million. 50 to 80,000 parts per million. not 420. Hell, not even, well, I take that back. 1,000's getting dangerous for humans anyway because of the oxygen situation. But 420. Now, will CO2 levels drop? Eventually. When? Maybe at the end of the grand solar minimum. Maybe once the seismic activity is quietening down once again and the volcano eruptions go down and CO2 levels off because there's not as much natural disasters like there is right now. Every day I see a volcano eruption of right around 20, 30,000 feet every day, it seems like lately. Thanks to our awesome team over there at the Grand Solar Minimum private channel on Facebook. Bogus, you constantly are keeping us updated on the earth or the volcano situation. Yeah, they're minor, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, but they're happening every day. So the CO2 levels, in my opinion, are going to continue to rise. But folks, we're only talking about 20 parts per million in the last, 30 years? So what's another 100 years from now? Maybe 60 parts per million? Again, nowhere near that dangerous level of 1,000 and higher. And I could be wrong on that 1,000. It could be a little bit higher than that. But today's presentation is here showing you that solar cycles do impact the climate. They impact ocean temperatures. I mean, I've shown you that. The La Nina region, holy moly, that's all I got to say. Let's go ahead and show you some interesting ocean temperatures really fast. This is the El Nino region, 3-4. Right now we are seeing values that are very strong for La Nina as we head into the summer. Okay. Let's go check out the next. This is going to shock you as well. This is how I believe we are going to head into another La Nina this winter and fall. Look at this. The Nina region 1 and 2 is 2 degrees below baseline right now, Celsius. 2 degrees. And just back March 17th, we were almost a full degree above baseline. So we have dropped almost 3 degrees Celsius in a month. Folks, there's proof that the waters are cooling all over the globe. I'll go over it right now. Let's do it. There's nothing to hide. I mean, you could see that. Look at that. That blue right here in the 1-2 region. You could clearly see that. This cooler region here, folks, is driving the La Nina. This is the perfect grand solar minimum setup. The warmer waters heading into the Northwest Pacific. Look back in time, you'll see that Alaska had some hot summers. We had drought across the West Coast and in the Southwest as well. But this is, wow, that is significant. But yet, you know, people like Bill Nye and others tell you that the oceans are warming. The warming oceans are killing us. Let's go check out the North Atlantic. Temperatures slightly above baseline. We are approaching the spring-summer season. Atlantic, below baseline. Mid-Atlantic, above baseline. There we go. Good news there, right? Some warmer waters. Gulf of Mexico, staying where it should, but it is above baseline at the moment, which is something to watch when it comes to hurricane season. East tropicals, wow, not doing so well. Well below baseline. Definitely not time for any kind of hurricane action here. Caribbean cooled off for a little bit and hit baseline, and now it's starting to warm up just a little bit. So we're seeing about 4 or 5 cooling trends, 3 that are above baseline and staying level. That doesn't sound like global warming to me. Global temperatures here, according to Tropical Tidbits, remain at 0.2 degrees above baseline. Folks, we are not in a crisis. We are nowhere near climate crisis status. You want to know the truth about climate? It's right here. You're going to have to watch this video more than once. There's no way you're going to obtain all this in one sitting. Break it down. Hell, maybe Mario will break it down into parts for us down the road. Like I said, we've got some upgrades coming to our channel. So very excited about that. But please, watch this video again. And then share it with your friends. Share it with people who are not closed-minded, who are not brainwashed by this science of persuasion that the AGW is practicing on the world right now. Can't make it any clearer than that. All right, let's say hello to people in the chat. Hello to my lovely wife, Mari. Good to have you back in here, man, in the chat for us. Mr. Boston, good to see you as well. Also, good to see a lot of new faces in here, too. Very enthusiastic gardener. I saw Patricia Clayton in here earlier. KC, Knife Collector, was in here. Phyllis, hello. North Texas Vegetable Gardening and Cooking. That sounds like a cool channel name. Mason Free Party. Vert Caver, good to see you as well. I haven't seen you in a while. Nick the Gardener, hello. Guys, if you like what we do, check us out on our Patreon channel. Cost $1 to join. I don't know what the levels are, but in time we will enforce these levels. That way people that are paying the appropriate amount actually get what they're paying for. Right now we look at the Patreon channel as a donation jar. Since YouTube has banned us from having any kind of ad revenue on our website and our YouTube channel, folks have been kind enough to go over to our Patreon channel and donate to us monthly, even if it's just $1. It means a lot. We have over 30,000 subscribers. So, anything helps, and it's always appreciated. And we can promise you one thing, it'll go right back into the channel. That's going to do it for me tonight, folks. Thank you for tuning into this special edition of the Grand Solar Minimum channel. I plan to do more updates starting Monday. Give you another Grand Solar Minimum update. And I also want to try to get our friend Matt Brose from Nebraska. He's a farmer. I'd like to get him on sometime this week, and we can talk about how his plant season is going so far. Until next time, folks, behave out there, and we'll talk soon.